Sunday night, there was a mass shooting in Las Vegas, Route 91 Country Music Festival. It was happening just across the street from the Mandalay Bay, just over Las Vegas Boulevard, just north of it. That is when 64-year-old shooter on the 32nd floor of the hotel shot fire down to a crowd of 22,000 people. At this point, and this was all because of last night at 7 p.m. when they had that last press conference out of Las Vegas, city officials, county officials, 59 people have died, 527 people are injured. So there are a lot of recovery efforts happening this morning in the hospitals in Las Vegas. People are donating blood in an effort to try to help. People are also asking a lot of questions. Yeah. And so we want to dive in and talk about some of those questions that you guys may have at top of mind. I know we had a person in here who's a faith leader, and he wanted to talk about how ways in which you can cope with this. There are events happening all over Northern California. We have a full list, abc10.com. But how about the bigger questions? And I know there was articles. There are a ton of articles posted online right now with some of those questions. So Dina, I want to go ahead and present some of those questions, because a lot of people will go, okay, yes, I had that question too.
Yes, and I actually put an article in here, and I can't seem to find it, but a lot of the questions that were being asked that USA Today wanted to answer. Thank you. So they went through some of the big things that people are talking about today. Of course, this morning we're finding so much more out about the victims in these horrific moments that happened on Sunday night. The people who are surviving and telling those tales, and then of course the loved ones of all of those victims. And so a lot of people this morning wanted to know more about how many victims there are. So again, the number, as Megan mentioned, 59 have confirmed dead, and then there are at least 527 who are injured. But as we know, that may go up still.
That number very fluid, yeah.
Many of these injuries were critical condition injuries, and so a lot of those who were in critical condition, unfortunately, may not make it.
Right. There was one thing that was pretty powerful last night, again, at that press conference at 7 p.m. last night. And they had said that at UMC, which is one of the medical centers in Las Vegas, you know, they're trained to deal with these mass situations, mass casualties. And they had said that anyone who showed up, who was brought to that hospital at UMC alive, is still alive. Meaning that no one had died if they were alive, but there were people that arrived to that hospital who had already passed. So of course those people have since passed, but that was just goes to show, and they were just really proud to say that anyone who showed up alive to UMC is still alive. So hopefully that is still the case this morning.
At least at that hospital. I was also seeing reports at Sunrise Hospital where they received the most of the patients, the most number. I saw pictures out of Sunrise Hospital that somebody took that just showed the hallways and the chaos and the devastation, and it's very graphic, so I'm not going to go into detail, but it's
and
just...
then they had at some of those hospitals hire, and this is a perspective one of the reporters in Las Vegas had said, that they had to hire extra maintenance people to come in to clean up the blood, to clean up the mess. You don't think about that. You think, okay, yes, extra doctors, extra nurses have to come into play, extra surgeons, but the maintenance people, they had to bring in a whole new you know, group of people, which is just so sad and graphic to even think about.
Yeah, and people don't usually think about that. And we shouldn't have to, again, because of the situation, but when there's violence involving guns, I saw an article floating around social media that was that came out a while back, but it kind of resurfaced about what a bullet actually does to the body. So I think, you know, when we talk about it and we know it's a tragedy, but when you actually think about the physiology of it and what the impact does to the body, then that becomes an additional discussion where there's lots of blood. There's blood donations, because again, when there's this amount of people wounded, you're going to need blood, because you know it's just a lot that is involved with gun violence.
Yeah. And again, you can find those locations in which you can donate blood on our website, abc10.com. And do remember that every blood donation can save up to 3 lives. So think about just the impact of going. You may get a little woozy, but just hydrate, eat food,
Drink some sugar.
Yes.
They give you cookies,
donate,
it's great.
Donate your blood.
I do want to get to some of the questions that were really popularly, commonly asked on USA Today, and one was, and something I've seen on social media, why are we not calling this terrorism? And was it an act of terrorism? These people were terrorized, certainly, by this one individual. But when you look up the definition of terrorism, and I have it pulled up here, It is the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. At this point, they have not said what the shooter's motive was. If it turns out that this was political ideology that helped guide him in the direction of why he felt like he needed to commit this heinous act, then I think we probably can change the conversation to terrorism. But at this point, the FBI has said, was he linked to a terror group internationally? No, he was not. Not that they have found at this point in the investigation.
International terrorism, even after ISIS came out and tried to claim responsibility, which we reported on this after show yesterday. No, that is not true. So, okay.
Yep.
That question still, though, like you said, people say this is an act of terror.
Yeah, and when you hear the FBI talk about this, they will not call it an act of terrorism at this point. He did terrorize, by definition, people. He harmed people. Innocent civilians, he did. But I know that the term terrorism hasn't yet been thrown around, and that's because they don't know what his motive was. And so when people are saying this was domestic terrorism, by definition, if it wasn't politically motivated, that's not definitively what we can call it. I know, though, human to human, yes, he terrorized civilians and took many innocent lives. That it's just tragic. But that question has popped up, and hashtag terrorism or not has popped up. I mean, we're starting to see that conversation everywhere.
And why do you think people get? Oh, just a question that I'm just thinking of. Why is it that people get upset when we're not calling it and identifying it as that?
Because what I gather is because nobody has taken the time to identify it as something. This isn't the first mass shooting that we've dealt with. This is not the first. Unfortunately, again, you can't see the future, but it may not be the last.
Yeah.
So if something like this is not considered terrorism, then what is it called? And what were the others called? And what are we going to call the others? Because the just dancing around it like, oh, it's not terrorism, we don't know what it is,
mental illness,
we have to categorize it as something, and then we have to address that, because again, we've seen this happen, and up to this point it hasn't been called terrorism. So what are we going to call it?
And I think that when you think about things that have been called terrorism in the past, you had 9/11, you had even the Pulse nightclub shooting, and then the San Bernardino shooting. Having a title added to it adds weight, I think, to the conversation when you can say this was terrorism. But maybe people feel like mass shooting, that's not giving it enough clout in what it is. This man took so many lives, and I completely understand that. But the FBI does define it differently, and it has to be politically motivated, which we may very well find out to be or not to be the case in the coming days. If there's a manifesto of some sort, if there are some records they can look through on his computers and tablets and phones, I mean, there might be information that will debunk if it was in fact politically motivated or confirm if it was. And so at this point, though, it's not a word that, you'll hear an official use to describe the severity of what happened.
Yeah, maybe because people want to identify him as a terrorist because they know that it has that negative connotation versus someone who's just a shooter who had this idea and then executed it and was, in his eyes, probably successful, which is terribly sad. So maybe there's this idea that people just want there, like Kennelia is saying, to be a label on it. So when we look at a list of terrorists, that shooter's name is there. And when we go back and forth, just as journalists, do we even give him the respect, if you will, of saying his name on air? And so some of us have just decided at some point you just got to stop saying the name, because that may be what he wanted, that may be what future
that infamy,
that what future shooters, killers want, and which is just so sad.
And real quick, the definition of terrorize: create and maintain a state of extreme fear and distress in someone, filled with terror.
So yes, he terrorized everyone in this country, really.
So then it's still hard to say, okay, then call this what it is if it's terrorism. But I understand what you're saying from the official's point of view. They have to be careful in the ways in which they describe and define these certain acts, because this, like you said, this isn't the first, this isn't the last.
Right.
Hopefully it is, but.
And another, I'm trying to pull up the USA
And while
Today
you're doing that, we have comments.
Sure.
Good morning, everybody. A lot of people chiming in. David Wong: I've been feeling numb for the most part, hoping that doing chores and running errands will help me get back to feeling normal. Kimberly Morgan says the same thing. She's doing the best that she can. well, a lot of people. Becky Schindler is asking in regards to what the Islam leader said, because when we first heard the report of the story, someone came out and tried to link this to an ISIS event. Maria Torres said he is a terrorist. So, a lot of comments.
Yeah, and the Islamic State on Monday did claim responsibility, saying the perpetrator was a soldier, quote unquote, who had converted to Islam months ago. However, the group, which often claims attacks by individuals inspired by its message, but with no known links to the group, provided no evidence to support that. So the FBI's Las Vegas office said that they had no connection. They had found no connection between Paddock and the terror organizations.
And I remember during one of those press conferences yesterday, it was in the morning, a reporter had said, well, ISIS is claiming responsibility. The AP is coming out and confirming that ISIS has said that. And then Joseph Lombardo, who's the sheriff in Las Vegas, said, well, good for them, like good for ISIS for trying to claim them. We have no reason to believe, and we are investigating, and he is not connected to that. We can rule terrorism out. Right. So we'll wait and see how that develops.
The other big conversation is the debate between semi-automatic and automatic rifles. And whether or not you believe that the gun debate should be brought up right now, that's not what we're here to tell you we should or shouldn't be talking about. But how was the gunman able to fire so rapidly is another question that USA Today has been receiving. So they explained that there are devices that can turn a semi-automatic into an automatic rifle, and that can actually allow somebody to fire nearly 700 rounds per minute, depending on the device used. And that means that you don't have to pull the trigger for each individual shot, that you can hold your finger down and fire rapidly. And we know that there were tripods found in his hotel room. There were 23 weapons found in his hotel room, another 19 in his Mesquite home. So this person was very much motivated to do something with that much arsenal.
And brought those weapons up to his suite. So they're calling this a suite, so you can tell that the room wrapped around, because one window was over here, the other window was over here. So it was a large room on the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay, facing the 22,000 people who were at this concert. But he used 10 suitcases to bring up those weapons. Again, 23 of them. And he'd been there since September 28th. And so he could have done this one suitcase at a time, one in the morning, afternoon, and night, or maybe all at once. So who at a hotel? You're at a hotel. People come here with their bags, with their suitcases, ready to be on vacation for X amount of days. Maybe he had been known. I mean, they talk about Mary Lou Danley, the woman whose ID he used, who now they're calling his partner. He was in a relationship with her, his girlfriend, who, again, in a press conference, the sheriff had said they believe that she is in Tokyo now. That is where they were able to find her yesterday, or was in the overnight hours. But yeah, maybe it was some connection that people just said, oh, okay, we know you because we're familiar with Mary Lou Danley. There are reports that she worked at Mandalay Bay at one point. So who knows who he knew that may have just let him go up without checking his bags. But then another question that came up in my mind was, well, when people were cleaning the room, if you're there since September 28th, people, the cleaners come in and clean your room unless you put the do not disturb on your door, which I'm sure he did. I don't know.
So that's something that ABC News had that conversation yesterday. George Stephanopoulos was saying they must have told the room service not to come. I mean, to have that much. But do they ever open your bags? Should they open your bags?
Exactly. So even if they were cleaning the room and he did not put the sign on the door that says do not disturb, as a hotel cleaning staff, technically, they're not supposed to go through your belongings. So
you hope not,
right? You would hope not. And in this case, if that was the case, they did not. So,
or if they saw something, maybe they didn't say anything.
And if you just see a suitcase sitting on the ground, maybe you see 4 bags, you're not going to be like, guns? You're just going to assume that maybe he's an overpacker?
But, you know, if he had his room reserved for a week or 5 days or 4 days and he puts the do not disturb sign every day, no one's going to come in.
Yeah.
You know, it's as easy as that.
The 28th was last Thursday. That's just a long weekend because this happened on Sunday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then the event happened Sunday night. So it's not far-fetched to believe that he'd put that do not disturb. Again, that's all assuming. But
And
more
Scotty
questions.
asked, how did he get the guns into the hotel room? I think they have metal detectors in the entrances of major hotels. But I don't believe they do.
Not last time I checked.
Especially in southern Nevada, in Nevada. That is absolutely a state. I grew up in Nevada. My family is still northern Nevada, and that is a state that very much wants to have their right to carry an armed weapon. There are many hunters in that state, and so if you legally can carry, though, from my understanding, there are not metal detectors going into most of those big hotels.
Last time I checked, I mean, I lived there for 4 years in Vegas, went in and out of those hotels a lot. Unless I didn't notice one, unless they have some sort of secret device that they use, it's not something that you're like, okay, I have to put my bag to the side, I'm going through a detector.
Because
And
how
for
many
that-
things would go off?
Yeah, exactly. That amount of traffic going in and out of a casino, Vegas, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people walking in and out of each casino, mainly sometimes just because it's too hot outside, so you cut through the casinos just to walk through.
Right.
So I would imagine it would be very difficult to have metal detectors because it would be a complete siren the whole time.
Yeah.
David Wong asked if there are cameras in the hallways to the hotel. Someone's got to be checking those recordings for evidence. And I know the sheriff did mention that there are many different angles of video camera footage that they are going to be sifting through. But you can imagine hours and hours over the course of those 4 days, from the parking garages to the entrances of the hotels to the hallways. I mean, they have, hindsight is 20/20, right? They will go back and they will see this person walking through with all these duffel bags or suitcases and think, wow, this looked abnormal. Why didn't we do something then? But you have to imagine there were how many floors on the Mandalay Bay?
43.
How many people going in and out?
43 floors. He was on the 32nd floor of that hotel, and just going up and down those elevators. Again, I was there last weekend. I popped into the wrong hotel. I was at Treasure Island. I was supposed to be at Circus, so it was one of those things. I popped in, I went up all those floors, easily went down all those floors, went back up. No one in the world knows who you are, what you're. They're supposed to check your card before you go. You make sure you have a room before you even go up to a room. I was meeting girlfriends there, so I didn't have a card, but no one. There's so many people, no one's checking. I went right up with my 3 suitcases. I mean, you see that happening all the time. It's easy for me to believe that he easily, it probably wasn't even an issue to get up there. And not to say that he had these big black suitcases that were identifiable. He could have had, who knows, this bag, this duffel bag, a backpack. So.
Oh, Scotty says, I'm sorry, they need metal detectors. Okay. So, but that raises that question too. I mean, do you think that they need metal detectors in hotel rooms? There are, a lot of arguments, of course, in the aftermath of what happened that you would say, yes, that might have helped to prevent something like this. But, when it comes to your privacy, you're on a vacation, you're thinking you're going to go have fun in Vegas. I mean, think about the tone of the city. Normally, it's a fun place for bachelorettes and birthday parties and gatherings. And, is that a place where you feel like you would feel more unsafe by having metal detectors and that presence all around you? Because it would make me start to think about things more if I had to walk through a metal detector everywhere I went. Maybe in the clubs I could see that, but I don't know about getting into every hotel room.
They do check you before the club. I did get
wanded.
The wanded before going into the club.
Okay. And
I
think
do
that
recall
makes sense.
that.
Yeah.